the world watched in horror. It was another day of relentless conflict in Gaza. Then the news broke. An Israeli airstrike had hit a school in Jabaliya, a beacon of hope turned sanctuary in a city under siege. The target, a building packed with families seeking refuge, a place where children played and doctors struggled to save lives. It was an act that would forever stain the conscience of humanity. Jabaliya, a densely populated neighborhood in Gaza City, had already witnessed unimaginable suffering. Yet, amidst the ruins, the school stood defiant, a symbol of resilience. It had become a makeshift shelter, a place where displaced families sought safety from the bombs. Now it was a scene of unimaginable carnage. The date will forever be etched in memory, October 18th, 2024. It was a stark reminder that even in the darkest hours, innocence is not spared. The school, once a sanctuary, now lay in ruins, a grim testament to the brutal reality of war. The air was thick with the smell of dust, smoke and death. Rescue workers frantically dug through the rubble, their faces etched with desperation. Each passing moment brought fresh horrors. The lifeless bodies of children, their faces frozen in terror, were pulled from the debris. Tiny limbs, once full of life, now lay limp and lifeless. Among the victims were doctors and nurses, their white coats stained crimson. They had dedicated their lives to healing, to offering hope in the face of despair. Now, they too were gone, their sacrifices a cruel testament to the indiscriminate nature of violence. Their loss left a void in a healthcare system already stretched to its breaking point. The scene inside the makeshift hospital was unbearable. Overwhelmed medical staff struggled to cope with the influx of casualties. The air was filled with the cries of the injured and the anguished sobs of those who had lost loved ones. It was a stark reminder of the human cost of this conflict, a cost measured in shattered lives and broken dreams. The dust settled, revealing the true extent of the devastation. The once proud school building was reduced to a mangled wreck. Twisted metal and shattered concrete littered the ground, a testament to the sheer force of the blast. But it was the silence that was most haunting. A silence broken only by the muffled sobs of grieving parents and the anguished cries of children searching for their loved ones. Amidst the debris, stories of unimaginable loss and resilience emerged. Parents clutched photographs of their children, their faces etched with a grief too deep for words. Friends and neighbors comforted each other, sharing stories of those they had lost, their voices trembling with emotion. The community, already reeling from days of relentless bombardment, was united in grief and outrage. The world looked on, horrified by the images flashing across their screens. But for the people of Jabaliya, this was not just another news story. It was their reality, a living nightmare that they could not escape. The airstrike on the school was a stark reminder of the human cost of this conflict, a cost measured in shattered lives and broken dreams. Whose truth? In the aftermath of the airstrike, conflicting narratives emerged, each side seeking to justify their actions to control the narrative. The Israeli military, in a carefully worded statement, claimed the school had been used by Hamas militants as a base of operations, that their actions were justified, that they had acted to protect their own citizens. They released grainy footage, open to interpretation, claiming it showed rockets being moved within the school compound. Hamas, the de facto ruling authority in Gaza, vehemently denied the allegations. They pointed to the countless innocent lives lost, the children, the doctors, the families seeking refuge. They called it a massacre, a war crime, a blatant disregard for international law. The world was left to grapple with two opposing narratives, each claiming the moral high ground, each accusing the other of propaganda and deceit. The truth, as is often the case in war, remained elusive, buried beneath the rubble of misinformation and political maneuvering. The international community, accustomed to such pronouncements, struggled to make sense of the chaos, to separate fact from fiction. Meanwhile, in Gaza, the cycle of violence continued, fueled by mistrust, fear, and a profound sense of injustice. Gaza bleeds. A humanitarian crisis unfolds. The airstrike on the school in Jabaliya was not an isolated incident. It was a brutal chapter in a larger narrative, a story of a people trapped in an endless cycle of violence and despair. For years, Gaza has been described as an open-air prison, its people subjected to a crippling blockade, their lives restricted, their movements controlled. The humanitarian crisis in Gaza had been escalating for years, but the recent violence pushed the already dire situation to the brink. Hospitals, already overwhelmed before the airstrike, were now overflowing with casualties. Medical supplies were running dangerously low, and the constant threat of bombing made it nearly impossible to deliver aid. Food, water, electricity, basic necessities became luxuries. Families huddled in their homes, terrified to venture outside, their lives on hold. The international community expressed its concern, but words rang hollow in the face of such suffering. The people of Gaza felt abandoned, forgotten by the world, left to face their fate alone. A plea for peace. The world cannot stay silent. The images from Jabaliya shocked the world. But would they spur action? The international community, so quick to condemn, seemed powerless to stop the bloodshed. The cycle of violence continued, claiming more innocent lives with each passing day. The world could no longer afford to remain silent. This was not just a conflict between Israel and Hamas. It was a humanitarian crisis of immense proportions. The people of Gaza, caught in the crossfire, deserved more than just words of sympathy. They deserved justice. They deserved peace. The time for empty rhetoric was over. The world needed to act, and it needed to act decisively. A ceasefire was the first step, but it was just a start. The root causes of the conflict, the occupation, the blockade, the settlements needed to be addressed. Only then could there be a glimmer of hope for a lasting peace, a peace built on justice, equality, and mutual respect. The world was watching. The question was, would they finally listen to the cries rising from the dust of Jabaliya?